Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to successfully set up an experiment. Before we even get started talking about how to set up an experiment, we first have to talk about why scientists do experiments and also be able to kind of understand what an experiment is. So scientists do experiments to answer their questions and curiosities about the world. And scientists throughout the years have learned a lot through setting up successful and correct experiments. Now, that means that there's a correct way to set up experiments, and then there's an incorrect way of setting up experiments. Because in order to answer that question, there is a correct way, and if we don't set up that correct way, then we may get results that are inaccurate or that may not help us answer that question. So how do we set up an experiment? Well, the first thing we have to do is to answer or to ask a question. Every time we set up an experiment, every time we do an experiment, the point is for us to answer a question. So in order to answer that question, we first have to figure out a variable. And a variable is something that we change during a science experiment. So a variable is anything that changes or that we change during a science experiment. And if we change more than one thing during a science experiment, we may not get a correct answer to that question. We may get an answer, but it's not the answer that we want, and it's not the answer to our question. So if we look at the bottom left picture, we see Mentos and about 5 different bottles of soda. We see Diet Pepsi, we see Pepsi, we see 7-Up, we see Diet Sunkist, and I don't know what the last one is on the far left. But when we do these Mentos experiments, one of the reasons why we love it is because it creates this big explosion after we do it. And for those of you who have never done a Mentos experiment before, what you basically do is you put a Mentos inside a soda can, shake it up a little bit, and release the cap, and that cap goes flying off, and you get this really kind of cool result. And so if we were trying to test, for example, what the best soda would be for the Mentos experiment, well, our variable, the thing that we would be changing is that soda. We wouldn't want to change what we're putting in the soda. So we want to keep that Mentos the same. We wouldn't want to change different things because that question we're trying to answer is what is the best soda for the Mentos experiment. And so that variable, we only ever change one thing. And in this case, we would be changing the soda because we're trying to figure out what the best soda is. So let's look at another example. Let's look at the Mario Brothers mushroom experiment. So Mario and Luigi want to know what the best season would be to plant their super mushrooms in order to defeat the evil Bowser. How would the Super Mario Brothers set up their experiment in order to answer their question? So again, to begin starting your science experiment, the first thing we have to do is ask a question. In this case, Mario and Luigi, the question that they're asking is what is the best season to plant their super mushrooms? Now, what are we testing for? That's one of those things that we have to think of. So the things that we're testing for and the things that we're looking at is the best season to plant super mushrooms. And if we look to the right here, we can kind of see a visual representation of our experiment. We have our super mushrooms in each picture, or each of our 4 little sections of the picture. And that picture is divided up into 4 different sections which are our seasons: summer, spring, winter, and autumn, or sometimes we call autumn fall. So when we are doing our experiment, our variable, the thing that we're changing, are the seasons. And again, we're changing the seasons because we're trying to test for the season that is best. A lot of times what we're testing for and that variable will end up being the same. We wouldn't want to change the mushroom. So if we were doing the mushroom in summer and spring, and then we changed to the fire flower in winter and autumn, well, that wouldn't help us figure out what the best season to plant the super mushrooms in, because we two of the seasons we're doing mushrooms and two of the seasons we're doing fire flowers, and so we're changing two things in that case. If we do the experiment as it's set up in the picture on the right, we have the mushrooms is the same on all of the pictures, and there's only one thing changing, which is the season. So one other thing we have to talk about is, to do a successful experiment, we have to do it multiple times. And we do it multiple times to make sure that the results are good. If we do an experiment once and get an answer, we don't always know if that answer is the correct answer. It could be a fluke, or it could be some data that is not always the best. So in order to get the best result, in order to get the for sure answer, we have to make sure that we only have one variable, and that we do only ever change one thing, change one variable, and also repeat it multiple times. Because if we repeat it multiple times and we get that same answer over and over and over again, we know that that answer for sure is the correct answer to our question. So in summary, what is an experiment? An experiment is set up to answer a question or curiosity about the world. There is a correct way and an incorrect way to set up an experiment. When we set up an experiment the correct way, we only ever change one variable at a time. And a variable is something that we change during an experiment. If we change more than one thing or more than one variable, then we're not going to get the answer to the question that we originally asked. So when we also do an experiment, we have to kind of think, what are the things we're testing for and what is the variable? In order to get the for sure answer, the definitive answer, we have to do the experiment multiple times. And if we get that same answer over and over and over again as we continue to repeat the process, then we know that that answer is the correct answer to our question. If we keep on getting different answers every single time, we may have to go back to the drawing board and make sure that our experiment is set up correctly. So I hope this helps. I hope this helps explain how to set up an experiment correctly, and I hope to see you in the next video.